negotiating with each other. Going somewhere for 10 days, yeah. It's been
Did that too, and we're I will call the meeting of the Breezy Point Planning Commission to order. We have an oath of office.
Roger, if you could stand.
Okay.
And I'm just going to read the oath and want you
Do I have to raise my right hand?
These do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota, faithfully discharge the duties of planning commissioner in the city of Breezy Point and the county of Crow Wing in the state of Minnesota to the best of my judgment and ability, so help me God.
I do.
Okay. Thank you.
Approval of the February 13th, 2017 minutes.
There was one thing that I just happened to notice. There's reference to one of the people who was at the meeting, and she's called Beverly Holcomb in one, and then Becky Holcomb in the other place.
Sisters.
Oh, so were two of them here? There were two different ones? Okay, and I knew there was a Bev Peterson, and I thought, okay, did we have the name?
There's like 5 sisters there.
No wonder we had so many people here. Okay, that's the only thing I have.
I move the minutes be approved as submitted.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. Motion passed. City Council liaison report. Michael is not here. Joe, do you have?
Well, I can do that, I guess. I need a copy of the minutes, though, or the agenda. Not that one, the council agenda.
Here.
Medals of commendation were given to two of the officers, Officer Reber and Lorch, for their efforts in saving people at that fire up on County Road 11. They rescued them moments before they passed, or they would have passed. The financial audit for 2017 was reported. We approved the Bladek contract, had a long discussion about airport lots. Lot 42 will be bid for consideration by the public. Compensation policy was adopted. Pat was given the authority to be the designated signatory for the city in replacing me. We hired a part-time officer and we approved the sale of the Explorer. That's it.
Questions of Joe or the mayor?
My only question is, how did the city get lots for at the airport? I guess I don't know the story behind it.
I can respond. We purchased those lots when they reconstructed Airport Road. It's a low area, and two of the lots are used for utility purposes, and it was a package of 3. And so one's used for storm sewer, one's used for sanitary sewer, and the other was high ground, and we just ended up with that parcel. On the lots on the north end, I have no idea. There were 3 other lots, but we were just talking about 42 last night.
Right, yeah. I was just curious, kind of,
Sure.
why the city would own lots.
Other questions? Teresa? Thank you, Joe. I will open forum number 1 and welcome the mayor and his wife.
The reason I'm here as mayor, last night at the city council, I did announce that we're going to be having a workshop specifically to address the North Star Center, some of the questions. That workshop is going to be at 7 p.m. on March 26th. It's going to be a joint meeting between city council and planning and zoning. So I'm requesting you to be there at that meeting. And at that point, we would be looking at the project's scope, the project schedule. I'm expecting that White Birch would be putting on essentially a repeat of the presentation that you're going to get tonight, after this. And we'd be wanting to look at infrastructure, interfaces, what are we going to be needing to be looking at, from a city standpoint, the infrastructure interfaces, And then also we'll be discussing public financing incentives such as tax increment financing or tax abatement. And we would be looking at the differences between the two, which ones are feasible, which ones would pose challenges. So and this would be a public meeting, so we would be hoping that we would get maybe some members from the public. So invite your friends and family. And hoping the press will be there as well, so we can get some coverage on it, because I know the city council has not really had any formal presentation on this project, and the issues that will have to come up specifically with, the financing aspect, we need everybody to be informed. So that's the purpose that I'm here, is to, make sure that you come to that, as well as on Thursday, we're gonna have a little get-together at 12:30 to welcome Patrick and welcome Joe out the door. Welcome Joe into retirement.
Yes.
So,
What, was that at 7 o'clock in the evening?
yes,
Okay, and here, I assume?
yes. Yep. And it's just a workshop, it's not a, like a formal meeting. Okay?
I think it's a great idea.
Any other questions? So, hope to see you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeff, this is open forum number 1, if you have anything. I will close open forum number 1 then and move to our next agenda item, which is North Star Center sketch plat. David Landecker. David, or Joe or Jerry, do you have anything first?
No, it's the David Landecker show.
David Landecker Show.
Good evening.
Good evening, David.
I apologize, I didn't, I got a new computer and it doesn't interface with the technology that the city has, so this was my PowerPoint. I'm glad I printed it out so that I can share it with you. And so I'm David Landecker. I live at 8581 Run Drive, Breezy Point, Minnesota, representing White Birch Inc. on the development of the North Star Center. The primary purpose of the reason I'm here tonight is because I'm preparing you for, we're at the April meeting. Well, within the next couple of days, we're going to submit a preliminary and final plat together for this project, bringing them forward to you at your April meeting. So timing is sort of all, collaborating, as the mayor has suggested. They're setting up this workshop meeting in April. We're going to likely have this plat in a final form, preliminary and final form for you to look at. So tonight was just sort of, we weren't able to get our ducks in a row, if you would, all put together for the preliminary plat submission for this meeting by last month. One, I was out of town, and two, the Cuyuna Medical Center folks and engineers and architects were trying to decide how the lines might fit on the property. So I didn't want to kind of rush things in here and then bring them all back changed in April, saying, oh, whoops, we didn't think about this quite right. So the first slide is, this is a sign that CRMC and Guides Point Pharmacy would like to put out on the property so the public can see that there's some activity happening, and to promote the fact that they're going to be putting a business out here. And I've talked to Jerry about getting a permit for it. It's a temporary sign just for that notification purposes. It will not be permanent. So it's exciting stuff. I guess I'm going to go through it real briefly. This is sort of the architecture that you'll be seeing on the front of the building. It's still a work in progress. There's people talking about adding this kind of roof and that kind of color scheme to it, but generally that's the the frontal view of it. If you go by on the highway, what it might look like. It's going to have a canopy for drop off with the cars. I'm on the actual third slide now. So you'll be driving underneath a canopy where you can drop off and not get burdened by the weather that might be occurring at that moment. The next slide is the site plan slide, and that's got three different colored buildings on it. It's got a tan building, which is the convenience store, that was already, a CUP's been approved on. And the blue and green is the pharmacy and the Cuyuna Medical Center. Now the blue building is, we're showing you two different pieces there. The Cuyuna's only looking at building the first half of that. So it's a 14,000 square foot Cuyuna Medical Center area, which is blue. They're gonna build the first 7,000 square feet, which is attached to the pharmacy at this time, with their goal or the hopes that if their projections are correct, they would be adding the next building in 3 to 5 years. So that's kind of the goal, and then they would have a 14,000 square foot facility. The pink building is another building that we're looking at designing. It would come kind of staged. The clinic building will come first, but the pink building, we've got a couple of tenants that are looking at that were, I think, in the newspaper report a month ago or a couple of weeks ago. We've got a physical therapist and a dentist that were kind of looking at some spaces in there. But nothing has been solidified to the point where we're designing that. Our primary interest right now and focus is Cuyuna. They would be sort of the anchor. The convenience store where the CUP was already approved is kind of going to go on the back burner at this point, so we can put our cards into one basket at this point to do that. That being said, the roadway through the project that would also encompass the convenience store at that time will be built, because it will also be part of the infrastructure needs. The next slide, which is the CRMC site slide, shows you again a close-up of the clinic building, the two different phases of it, kind of the parking and features that fit with it. And it's been designed, the parking and so forth have all been designed to fit the build-out square footage of the 14,000 square feet. So with the 2,200 square feet of the pharmacy. But that's generally how those sites would flow. There was a modification made to the site plan on the convenience store, which I don't want to get into all the details, but it was actually an improvement that I'm trying to think of the councilwoman's name that was Carol had made, where she said, I'm not sure that all of your drive lanes are straight through your parking area, and sometimes pedestrians, that causes problems. Well, as the engineers and architects were laying out the convenience store, and we're looking at the clinic building and the convenience store, you'll see that they popped in another entrance to the convenience store up above, where the loop traffic can flow all the way through without going through the parking area closest to the building. So they did make a slight modification to that particular plan. If you recall, and then I'll show you that but that site, the Cuyuna Medical Building site, was actually looked at as being potentially a hotel maybe someday, or some other kind of retail. And so by putting the clinic here, kind of changed the dynamics of the original plan that we had in our heads, that we had on paper, because of the need for the certain kind of parking that Cuyuna wanted in the front, and everything the building got pushed back, parking got laid out in the front, which was a little different than what we had originally proposed. So the market site is the next slide, which again kind of identifies that drive-through area that I just mentioned. Otherwise, for the most part, that site hasn't changed. And then the next slide says municipal sewer option, and that's kind of the mayor's point of having the workshop, is to get into the weeds. And this particular layout isn't much different than what you saw before. I mean, when I presented the other plans for this proposal with the convenience store and the overall site view, we had a sewer going through here. So it's not really new news to you, but it kind of comes into, at this point, now we're firming up exactly how it's going to fit and where things are going to go on, what costs, and who's doing what part. So that's just kind of an overview on that. So the reason I'm here is the next slide, which is preliminary plat. It kind of lays out the road is going to be an outlot. The lots will be just large lots that the tenants will have leases on. And then the big outlot, which is zoned, I always forget what that crazy zoning district is. Urban, yeah.
Reserve.
Reserve.
Has been left as an outlot, which currently then encompasses the wetland, the stormwater ponds that we built, and then some other just green space open areas there. So that is, that's sort of what the look is. The Crow Wing County Highway Department will receive easements for the stormwater site. So that's this kind of big flag here, and there's an actual easement that goes along the front of Outlot B along County Road 11. That's a drainage easement for the development, mostly flowing overland. And then there's an easement up in the northeast corner of the development, which is open area. And that could be, I think, as we had discussed in other presentations, the potential for a roundabout if that were ever to come there, if they were to do some kind of traffic control. So that's the preliminary, or the beginning of a preliminary plat, which will be part of the submission here in the next few days to be vetted in April, at your April meeting. The last, or the second to last slide here is the 2007, this is the master plan that I previously submitted and presented to you. Along with, actually in June and July of last year, when the CUP was approved. And again, it just kind of, it shows you a little bit different dynamic of how the site's now actually turning out with the particular facilities. But we're, it's following along on that path on that side of the street. And then the last one, the last page is just what did the CUP look like originally as it was approved. So again, there's been some refinements made, but I think for the most part, it's a similar layout, and the conditions that were applied to it would stand otherwise they currently do. So no changes to those. So I mean, that's pretty much in a quick overview of what's going on. For me, it's part of me being here tonight is, the more information everybody has ahead of time to kind of think things through, they're better prepared for it. When we do have a workshop, you may have gone home and for the next couple of weeks are able to think things through where you'll have some really good questions or be able to plan and provide some good input. So I'm open for questions. Commissioner, staff, or public that's attending. If anybody has anything that they want more information on.
Thank you, David. Jerry?
Just a quick question. You have block 3, lot 2 on the preliminary plan?
Lot 3, lot 2, yeah.
That's, you're kind of showing that as an L shape, and I'm wondering what the reasoning for the tail behind lot 1 is.
I think it's because we're really not sure who the tenants of those are, but one of the things is that one of the tenants that's looking at this lot 2 site is looking at potentially connecting to that other building. Actually having like an L-shaped building, which is there, but to have a drive-through that drive all the way around. So part of it's just that there might be some things that ultimately get built on lot 2, block 3. The buildings that we have shown there are just sort of another, excerpt of what a plan might look like, but we have a tenant that might put one building on there. It might turn out to be one building, and then the drives and things would change. And so it's sort of to give that building the opportunity to hook on to this other site, plus, direct drainage straight out. There's no magic behind it. We could just connect that all the way across. If we needed to subdivide it in the future, we can deal with it then. So nothing magic, but that's kind of the way it's laid out. Is just the proposed building on lot 1, block 3. It just encompasses the area it's using, the parking and the building. and then the leftover all went into the Lot 2, Lot 3. So no particular design reasons. Other questions?
Are you still looking at the hotel somewhere?
Not, well, I mean, it's in the bucket of things at the resort, but probably not on the site.
Okay.
I mean, I think ultimately, this site has changed its flavor where if we could call it a medical plaza, or, you know, that if we could get mostly medical tenants or professional tenants out here. There was some discussion of a assisted living provider, so it would be kind of married to that medical kind of assisted theme.
And where would that go then, if you went like with assisted living?
Potentially that Lot 2, Lot 3, the one that we're talking
Okay,
about,
got
the
it.
tail. Yeah.
What about over across the way where there, in your 2017 plan, you had the North Star Event Center?
Yes.
That still is in,
That's still in the plans. We actually have, we hired an architect right at the end of 2017. That's done, you know, kind of a budget, cost budget for it, a layout, how it would fit, look a little bit different than this. So it's in the hopper, but it's one of those chicken and the egg things. This is a real tenant, and so we want to take care of the tenant first. And that's kind of, you know, riding in the wind. So it's still there. I mean, we're active, having meetings with contractors about costs and things. So
And
it's, so that's still in the works, that particular event center.
and what about a second sheet of ice? I know that was.
That is a second sheet. of ice.
So that would be part of that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all one kind of collaborative use.
Okay. And another question, and this is probably more for Jerry. I've forgotten with the CUP, now if the convenience store has been put on the back burner, is that affecting the CUP?
They would,
Have to renew.
they would have to renew it. It's, if it isn't used within a year, it would go away, but I think the intent is to renew it.
Right, yeah, it is. The intent would be to, at your probably June meeting, to ask for another year extension.
Okay.
Roger?
Just might be a silly question, but the clinic, could they make it more of an up north look? Or that's probably, it looks like a clinic, but I guess that's what it's gonna be, but, you know.
Well, actually, believe it or not, if you go up the street to the school, there's a lot of matching architecture with how the
Oh,
school is. It's
okay.
kind of like
Yeah, I guess that's
mirroring
right.
some of the colors and architecture and schemes from that. But we're also trying to, if you remember in my original presentation, and I didn't have that in here, I can bring it to the workshop, your question about the second sheet of ice. We're trying to match all the architecture in that area, so when you come through on that drive, the buildings that are on the south side of the road, the clinic and the convenience store, as well as the ice arena, will have a similar appearance. And so the this is a different architect than the ice arena architect. And when you see the ice arena architecture plan, you're gonna go, those two guys must have been talking. But they weren't. I mean, the colors are similar, the roof lines are shaped the same. And so both of them are thinking similar themes. And yeah, so I mean, we're excited for it. We want to kind of have a factor of, you know, you're in Breezy, this is, you know, a nice view. And we're hoping that the bricks and the earth tone colors we're using kind of still fit into that Northwoods theme, if you would.
And kind of in the same vein, you know, that whole beautification committee that is coming along, that we're talking about the corner here, but obviously, at some point, we'll be talking about your corner down there too. And
Sure.
so there'd be hopefully some coordination as you're doing landscaping with what is the intent on this corner too.
Right, well, our goal is that once we kind of get the buildings all figured out on that front corridor, that we can look at a landscape, you know, a landscaping plan that will fit, like, just like you're saying, kind of fit that whole corridor through there. So that's sort of the ultimate goal is, you know, Bob Spizo's always been, you know, when you look at the antlers and different projects he has, he's always been, you know, kind of forethought thinking about the landscaping that goes with it. In the beginning of a project, it doesn't quite look as glamorous as it does 10 years later when things are all in full bloom and now reach some heights that you would have hoped it could have started with, but that's not how trees grow. They start with one. But no, the landscaping will be critical part of this as we come through that corridor. So our goal is to kind of have that be, as we've always said, as the gateway as you come into Breezy, that will be sort of the first major gateway piece that you can see when you come in all over Breezy. So that's our goal.
Tracy?
A couple of questions. You have the rendering of, in your package, of what says the clinic.
Yeah.
And you said they're only gonna build the first 7,000 square feet.
Yes.
So does that mean what we're looking at is about twice what's gonna be built right away?
No, this is actually the first phase building.
This is the first phase.
Yeah.
And does it include the pharmacy on the right side?
Yes, yes.
It does, okay. Quite frankly, I think it's pretty nice looking, I mean, all things considered. I realize it doesn't look like my old A-Pine, but I think you've done a nice job in that respect. The next question would be, would you intend that the other buildings on this site would be of consistent architecture?
Right, yeah, exactly. In fact, what we're leaving this architect with that's designed this for us is to have sort of a specification, 2 or 3 sheet specification, so that if we have another building go up and he's not involved in the architect, let's say that tenant has their own architect, they get the specification, says this is the materials, this is the color, this is the look, et cetera, et cetera. So absolutely, that's the goal.
Thank you, David.
All right, thank you for listening and having time for me tonight.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Other, the Gall update. Jerry, do you have something you want to say about that?
Sure.
I assume?
Pardon?
I would assume you have something to add to our packet.
Yeah, you're assuming just some background. We got a proposal from a gentleman to, the first brush was that it was going to be a garage on a vacant lot that's on Timberline Point in Osawatomie. When we got into it a little bit further, we found out that it was a garage with living quarters upstairs and a full-fledged deal, and we started looking at what variances are necessary to accomplish that. Well, the more we got into it, the more we started uncovering, and the more levels of government are involved. We're now involved with the floodplain, which is something that we didn't have a year ago at this time. We've got shoreland regulations that the DNR enforce and are looking at. We have city regulations, and we have a number of city regulations that conflict with what they're trying to do on this lot. And so we actually returned the application for a variance and basically said, let's regroup and figure out exactly how to proceed, or if there is a way to proceed. And that prompts this discussion with you, is that I think the biggest issue we've got right now is we have rules and regulations that determine when lots are buildable and they are not buildable. And I guess I'd like you folks to look at and think about philosophically is what makes an unbuildable lot and what makes a buildable lot. There's a segment of the public that thinks every lot is buildable as long as you grant carte blanche variances. Is that the road you want to proceed down, or do you want to have some kind of criteria to figure out whether those lots are unbuildable? And I recognize that this is a lakeshore lot that's a little bit more valuable per se than some of the others that we have around town, but yet there's some of the same issues that we have where we say that we need 12,000 square feet and you only have 8,000 square feet, we're enforcing unbuildable lots on other areas. Yet the public in some ways are insistent that they should be allowed to build on some of these lots that by definition are unbuildable. Where do we go? And I don't expect answers. I expect that we're going to have another discussion about this at our next meeting. But I just wanted to introduce it to you and to think about it a little bit. This specific proposal is probably more complicated than most would be, but yet it has some ramifications. If in fact you look at this and say, well, we should grant a variance here, but not over here, how do you make that distinction? That in a nutshell is my update on this project. But it's a very, very difficult project because of the number of variances that would be necessary in order to make it happen, let alone the shoreland things that are DNR approved and the FEMA floodplain implications that are on this slide also.
Harry, could that discussion wait or be incorporated into our long-range planning?
It certainly could. It certainly could. This is, it prompted the discussion now is the fact that there was a request or a proposal. Maybe that's a legitimate way to handle it, but I think we still need to have some kind of a discussion, and I think we have to be serious about it. And sometimes it's easier to discuss it when there's a proposal in front of you than just saying, well, let's talk about this.
We're discussing it after we've gone through a painful variance request.
Painful variance request or a painful denial or a lengthy legal thing. I do expect to talk to our city attorney about this issue. I haven't at this point yet, but I would expect that we would want him to weigh in on those discussions.
Any thoughts that you would like to share?
I guess just as a general comment, without being just specific to those lots, we've had a lot of variance requests the last few years, a fair number of them, where there's been a request for one or perhaps two variances or two conditions, or when we start talking 5, that seems to me, personal opinion, seems to me that that's kind of saying that's not a buildable lot, especially considering it's on the water. If it was not on the water, maybe there would be more discussion, but I can't even imagine all of the dancing around that would have to be done to make that a buildable lot.
The other thing that gets involved in this one that makes it a little bit more complicated, and it's very hard to address today, we don't know whether the soils are suitable for a septic system today.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a county thing, not a...
Well, it's part us and part county. The county actually permits and does the inspections and determines whether it's appropriate to build on our behalf, quite frankly.
So if I had city sewer, that would be one less item to...
If there was city sewer, it probably wouldn't make it quite as
complicated, yeah.
complicated
Yeah.
or sensitive.
Tracy?
I'm kind of the new person, so I may not be speaking from total knowledge and intelligence, but we've got a number of rules that for whatever reason we've developed to protect the environment, the neighbors, the whole deal. And it would seem to me that, as Peggy said, there are enough strikes against it that I personally would have a difficult time to accept the variance, I would suggest that if there's enough sentiment that they want to change all these rules, that should come up in the long-range planning. But as it stands now, and as what I see and what I know of that area, no.
Well, I don't think you're ruling on anything, I'm just.
I know, I'm just saying that, you know,
An opinion.
we either need to change the rules or I follow the rules.
This particular case, we'd have to change like 4 out of
Yeah,
5,
yeah.
the septic we would, yeah.
And if one of, as Tracy said, if one of our goals here, you know, is to not make mistakes and grant variances that really probably are not a good idea, or at least infringe on what we say we want to do, and that's protect the environment, even the long-range plan would have to, the objectives would have to change. And I can't see that happening.
Another personal observation from my years of living around here, I think people knew or should have known what they were buying. And to get something like this and then want to get a variance to do something different with it, kind of rubs me the wrong way.
So Jerry, a discussion of a criteria for a buildable lot will be placed on future agendas.
Mhm.
Everyone in agreement with that? Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will open forum number 2. Would anyone, Jeff, get anything? Sure, I knew we could talk.
I wouldn't come to a meeting if you weren't going to speak.
Jack Johnson representing White Birch. Really the only thing on my mind tonight would be the White Birch Village project, and we need to look at starting phase 2. I think I mentioned that to Joe a month or 2 ago, and that's still the case, and so I guess this is your last week, so.
I showed Patrick the
Okay,
layout
excellent.
and
I'll
everything
stop
today.
over and talk with Patrick at some point then, and introduce myself, and we'll get started on that project.
Good.
And that was about it for me.
Good. Thank you, Jeff. I will close open forum number 2, and before we adjourn the meeting, we want to express our appreciation for everything you've done for the city and your support of us.
Thank you.
Much appreciated, and you've done a great job.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with you folks too.
Thank you. Thank you. Roger?
Yeah, I've only been here 2 years, but have to get your number and email address, so. In case I get you to build me a fishing rod.
Okay.
Peggy?
You got-
Yeah, ditto.
Thank you.
It's been very much appreciated that you're very accessible.
Thank you.
Tracy?
Appreciate your services, and, you know, you've made a lot of these meetings much more dull and calm and collected. Kind of took a little fun out of things, but other than that, we thank you very much.
Thanks, Tracy.
And we look forward to working with you, Patrick.
Same here, ditto.
Good. Good. Joe, we have a little
Okay.
something for you.
Well, thank you.
You bet.
By the way, I talked to Larry,
Is it a variance request?
It's a variance request.
I talked to Larry Neer, and he wanted to also express his thanks to you, Joe, that he's sorry he's not here to say goodbye officially, but he appreciates the efforts you put forth on our behalf.
Yeah, he emailed me, and thank you.
Did he? Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, this is very
One
nice.
free variance for anything we need, is that what?
Thank you very much. That's nice.
The envelope, Joe, is an opportunity for you and your wife to celebrate your retirement at dinner at Amherst.
That's very nice. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I would adjourn the meeting unless something else needs to be done or said.
Does the new city manager have anything he wants to say to us?
Patrick, anything that you would like to tell us about yourself or expectations of us?
Well, obviously, I'm learning the city. This is day 2, and so I had a couple tours with staff and Joe, and then hopefully next week I'll start some tours with the council and get their expectations, and then talking with some of the council members, and then meeting with yourselves also, and finding out what your expectations are, so that I can help facilitate your needs and the needs of Breezy Point.
Great. We welcome you.
Thank you.
Usually our meetings are not this.
Short? No.
Makes up for last night's city council meeting.
That was exciting.
Meeting is adjourned.
Oh,
Oh, I suppose.
you'll have to watch it.
Yeah, I will.
This is a good idea.
Yeah, I gave a report last time and we haven't